The space station Harmony Prime was alive with noise and color. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had gathered here for the annual military technology exhibition. It was the biggest event of its kind. Every species wanted to show off their newest weapons, their strongest shields, their fastest ships. Pride filled the massive exhibition halls like invisible smoke. Lieutenant Park Soo-min stood near the human display booth, watching the crowd pass by. She was 34 years old, with sharp eyes and calloused hands that told stories of years spent working with metal and machines. Behind her, covered by a black cloth, was Earth's newest creation, the K-7 Fortress armor. 6 years of research, countless failed prototypes, and now, finally, it was ready for the galaxy to see. Her team of 5 soldiers waited nearby. They wore their dress uniforms and tried to look professional, but Soo-min could see the tension in their shoulders. They all knew what was coming. They had seen how aliens looked at human technology before, like teachers watching children play with wooden blocks. The exhibition hall was designed to impress. Floating platforms carried displays of energy weapons that could punch through starship hulls. Holographic demonstrations showed shields that could stop asteroids. The Dazari delegation, beings made of flowing silver light, displayed their natural energy barriers. They did not need technology. Their own bodies generated protection that no weapon could penetrate. At least, that was what they believed. The Veluxi had drawn the biggest crowd. These tall insect-like creatures stood nearly 3 meters high, with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the lights like scattered jewels. Their ambassador, a being named Kirix, was personally demonstrating their newest shield generator. It weighed less than 2 kilograms. When activated, it created a bubble of blue energy around the user that could stop plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, and even some directed energy weapons. Soo-min watched the demonstration with professional interest. The shield was impressive. She could admit that freely. But she also noticed something that the cheering crowd seemed to miss. The generator made a high-pitched whine when it absorbed impacts. That meant it was converting energy, not deflecting it. And anything that converted energy could be overloaded. A Karvani veteran stood at the edge of the crowd, separate from the others. His name was Drell, and unlike most aliens here, he did not seem impressed by the shiny displays. His gray-green scales were marked with old scars. His left arm ended at the elbow, replaced by a simple mechanical prosthetic. He had the look of someone who had seen real combat, not just demonstrations. Drell caught Soo-min watching him. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement. She returned it. There was a strange understanding between soldiers who had actually been to war. Words were not always necessary. The time came for the human presentation. Soo-min stepped onto the small stage that had been assigned to them. It was one of the smallest platforms in the hall, tucked into a corner far from the main traffic. She had requested a larger space, but her request had been politely declined. Humans were still new to the galactic community. They had only been among the stars for 80 years. In galactic terms, they were babies. She pulled the cloth away from the K-7 armor. The reaction was immediate. And not in a good way. Laughter rippled through the nearby crowd. A Dazari delegate literally flickered with amusement, his silver form pulsing brighter for a moment. Several Veluxi turned their compound eyes toward the display, and Soo-min could almost feel their confusion. The K-7 was massive. It stood on a platform like a metal giant, nearly 2.5 meters tall. The armor was thick and angular, designed to deflect impacts rather than absorb them. Ceramic plates covered every surface, layered over a metal frame. The joints were reinforced with shock-absorbing gel packs that looked like black rubber muscles. Life support systems, communication arrays, medical injection ports, backup batteries. Everything was built into the suit. It weighed 200 kilograms. Ambassador Kirix pushed through the crowd. His forearms folded across his chest in what Su Min had learned was a gesture of amused disbelief among his people. "This is your defensive technology?" he asked, his translator device turning his clicking speech into smooth words. "It looks like you wrapped a soldier in a building." More laughter. Su Min kept her face calm. She had expected this. The K7 Fortress armor provides complete protection against kinetic and energy weapons up to Class 4, she said, keeping her voice steady and professional. The layered ceramic metal composite plates can withstand direct plasma impacts. The gel underlayer absorbs shock and prevents internal injuries. The soldier inside can fight for up to 48 hours without external support. Kirix made a sound that his translator turned into a snort. "And how fast can this soldier move while carrying a small vehicle on his back?" "Walking speed is approximately 4 kilometers per hour under combat conditions," Su Min admitted. "Running is not recommended." This time, even some of the more polite aliens could not hide their amusement. A Dazari delegate drifted closer, his silver form casting strange shadows on the display. "Forgive my confusion," he said, his voice like wind chimes. "But why would any species choose to carry such weight? Energy shields provide superior protection with a fraction of the mass. Your soldiers could move 5 times faster with proper shield generators." Su Min looked at the glowing alien. "Energy shields are excellent technology, but they have limitations. They require power. They can be overloaded. They can be disrupted. Our armor works even when everything else fails." The Dasari's form flickered. Nothing can overload a properly calibrated shield. Su Min chose not to argue. Some lessons could only be learned through experience. The crowd began to drift away, moving toward more impressive displays. Soon, only a handful of beings remained near the human booth. Su Min's team looked discouraged. Private Kang Minji, the youngest member, was gripping her uniform cap so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. But one figure remained. Drell, the Kolvani veteran, stood studying the K7 with quiet intensity. His mechanical arm clicked softly as he flexed its fingers. "I fought beside humans once," he said, his voice low and rough. "During the Kolvani border conflict, 15 years ago, a human soldier carried me 3 kilometers to safety after my squad was destroyed. He was wearing armor much lighter than this. It still saved both our lives." Su Min looked at the old soldier. "Were you there when the Vern attacked the mining outpost?" Drell nodded slowly. The humans were the only ones who did not run. Even when everyone else retreated, they held their position. He looked at the K7 again. "This armor. It is not about technology, is it? It is about philosophy." "Yes," Su Min said simply. "It is about being impossible to move." Drell was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out with his organic hand and touched one of the ceramic plates, feeling its rough surface under his scales. "The galaxy has forgotten what it means to hold ground," he said quietly. "They rely on shields and speed. They have never met an enemy that could take those things away." He looked at Su Min with old, tired eyes. "I hope they never do. But I fear that day is coming." He turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the colorful crowd. Su-Min watched him go. She thought about his words for a long time, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that the old veteran might be right. That day was coming sooner than anyone expected. 2 weeks passed after the exhibition. Life returned to normal. Lieutenant Park Su-Min and her team went back to their regular duties at the Coalition military base on Station 12. They trained, they maintained their equipment, and they tried not to think about the laughter that had followed them out of the exhibition hall. Then the emergency broadcast came. Su-Min was in the armor bay when the alarm started. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. Soldiers rushed past her, heading toward the briefing rooms. She grabbed Sergeant Yoon Jae-won by the arm as he ran by. "What is happening?" she asked. Jae-won's face was pale. "Vern Collective. They attacked a mining colony. Karath 4. Thousands of hostages." The words hit Soo-min like a punch to the chest. Everyone knew about the Vern. They were raiders, pirates, and worse. They attacked civilian targets because military ones were too hard. They took hostages because hostages could be sold or traded. And they had one weapon that made them nearly unstoppable. The Pulse Annihilator. Soo-min rushed to the briefing room. It was already packed with soldiers from a dozen different species. Veluxi, Dasari, Corvani, humans, and others she could not immediately identify. They stood in groups, separated by species, speaking in low voices. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. A holographic display dominated the center of the room. It showed a planet covered in gray rock and thin clouds. Karath 4. A mining world rich in rare minerals, but too harsh for comfortable living. The colony housed about 3,000 workers and their families. They had built their lives in pressurized domes beneath the planet's surface, digging wealth from the stone. Now the Vern had those people. All of them. Ambassador Kirix stepped onto the raised platform at the front of the room. He wore military insignia now, marking him as the commander of the Combined Coalition Rescue Force. Soo-min was not surprised. The Veluxi had provided the most ships for this mission. That gave them command authority by coalition rules. "Listen carefully," Kirix said, his translator making his clicking speech into sharp, clear words. "The Vern have fortified the main colony complex. They have placed their Pulse Annihilator at the center of the settlement. Any ship that enters orbit will be destroyed. Any ground force with energy shields will be helpless the moment they get within range." He pressed a button, and the hologram changed to show the colony layout. Tunnels and domes spread across the image, like a web of connected bubbles. The hostages are being held in the central habitat dome. We estimate 2,800 civilians, including over 400 humans. The Vern have approximately 600 fighters on the ground. Murmurs spread through the room. 600 Vern was a serious force. They were not like regular pirates. They trained hard and fought harder. Each one was worth several ordinary soldiers in a straight fight. Kirix continued. "We will land outside the Pulse Annihilator's effective range and advance on foot. The Dasari will provide mobile shield coverage. Veluxi shock troops will lead the assault. Corvani heavy weapons teams will provide fire support." He paused and looked directly at the human contingent. "Human forces will secure the outer perimeter during the assault. Rear guard duty." Soo-min felt her soldiers stiffen around her. Rear guard. The assignment given to troops that commanders did not trust or did not need. It was barely better than being left behind entirely. Sergeant Yoon leaned close to her ear. "We trained for years. Our armor is designed for exactly this kind of mission. And they put us in the back? The commander does not believe in our equipment," Soo-min whispered back. "He thinks we will slow down his assault. Will you protest?" Soo-min thought about it. She could demand a different assignment. She could argue that human armor was uniquely suited for fighting the Vern. She could make a scene. But she remembered something her father had told her long ago, when she was just a child dreaming of becoming a soldier. He had said that real strength was not about proving yourself to others. Real strength was about being ready when the moment came. "No," she said quietly. "We will take the assignment. We will do our duty. And we will be ready." Jae-won looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. He understood. The fleet departed 6 hours later. 12 warships from 7 species, carrying nearly 2,000 soldiers. It was the largest coalition military operation in 3 years. News networks across the galaxy were already broadcasting updates. The whole universe was watching. During the journey, Su Min studied the intelligence reports on the Verne. She had fought them once before, during a minor skirmish on a trade station 2 years ago. She remembered how fast they moved, how brutal they were. And she remembered the stories about the pulse annihilator. No one knew exactly how the weapon worked. Some scientists believed it generated a frequency that interfered with energy containment fields. Others thought it released exotic particles that disrupted power flow. What everyone agreed on was the result. When the pulse annihilator fired, every energy shield within 2 kilometers simply stopped working. Instantly. Completely. For species that relied on shields for protection, facing the pulse annihilator was like facing death itself. Su Min pulled up the specifications for the K7 armor on her personal display. She read through the technical documents she had memorized years ago. The armor used no energy shields. It had no force fields. It was pure physical protection. Ceramic, metal, gel, simple materials, combined in complex ways. She wondered if Kirix had even considered that fact. Probably not. To him, the lack of energy shields was a weakness, not a strength. He could not imagine that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways. Private Kang Minji approached her seat in the transport bay. The young soldier looked nervous, but she was trying hard not to show it. "Lieutenant," she said, "what happens if the main assault fails?" Su Min looked at the young woman. Minji was only 22. She had joined the military to pay for her education, never expecting to see real combat. Now she was flying toward a battle that could kill her. "If the main assault fails," Su Min said, "then we do whatever is necessary to save those hostages. But we have been ordered to hold the perimeter." "Orders are important," Su Min agreed. "But people are more important. Remember that, Private. We wear this armor to protect others. If the moment comes when we must choose between following orders and saving lives, we save lives. Always." Minji nodded slowly. She did not look less nervous, but she looked more determined. Su Min watched the stars pass through the small window beside her seat. Somewhere ahead, 3,000 people were waiting for rescue. They did not know that the soldiers coming to save them had been pushed to the back of the line. They did not know that the commander in charge thought human armor was a joke. They only knew that they needed help. And help was coming. Su Min closed her eyes and began to review her combat plans. In her mind, she walked through every corridor of the colony complex. She imagined every choke point, every defensive position, every place where 30 soldiers in heavy armor could make a difference. She did not know yet how right she would be. The Verne scouts spotted the humans first. They sent back confused reports to their commanders. A small group of enemy soldiers was approaching the colony on foot. They were not running. They were not using vehicles. They were simply walking across the open ground, making no attempt to hide or take cover. The Verne commander, a scarred veteran named Threx, received the reports with amusement. The coalition was truly desperate if they were sending walking targets toward his position. He ordered his troops to engage, finish them quickly, then return to guarding the hostages. Su Min saw the Verne emerge from the colony's outer structures. About 50 of them, moving fast with weapons raised. They were confident, almost casual. Why would they not be? Their pulse annihilator had just destroyed the most advanced shields in the galaxy. What could a handful of slow-moving soldiers possibly do against them? She raised her arm, signaling her platoon to form a line. The humans spread out, creating a moving wall of armored bodies. They did not stop walking. They did not speed up. They maintained the same steady pace they had used since leaving the ridge. The first shots hit Private Kang Minji square in the chest. 2 plasma bolts, bright blue and screaming hot. They struck her armor and splashed apart like water hitting a rock. Minji stumbled from the impact but kept moving forward. Inside her helmet, her heads-up display showed minimal damage. Surface burns on the ceramic plating. Nothing that reached the protective layers beneath. More shots followed. The Vern were firing rapidly now, concentrating their weapons on the advancing humans. Plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, even a few explosive charges. The humans took every hit. And they kept walking. Sergeant Yoon felt a kinetic round strike his shoulder. The armor dented but did not break. The shock-absorbing gel beneath the metal plates compressed, spreading the force across his entire upper body. It felt like being punched by a professional boxer. Painful, but not dangerous, thought he kept walking. The Vern commander Threx watched through magnified optics as his soldiers poured fire onto the approaching humans. He saw the impacts. He saw the armor hold. And for the first time since the battle began, he felt something unfamiliar twist in his gut. Fear. Activate the Pulse Annihilator, he ordered. Maximum power, now. Deep within the colony, technicians rushed to obey. The massive weapon hummed to life, its coils glowing brighter as power surged through its systems. The Vern had used it once today already, but it could fire again. And again. And again. There was no enemy in the galaxy that could withstand its effect. The pulse wave struck the advancing. Humans like an invisible hurricane. Su-Min felt nothing. Her armor did not flicker. Her systems did not fail. She looked at her display and saw the same readings she had seen a moment before. Power, stable. Shields, not applicable. All systems, normal. The Pulse Annihilator had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had disrupted every energy field in range. Every shield. Every force barrier. Every protective technology that relied on power and containment fields. The K7 Fortress armor had no energy fields. It was metal and ceramic and gel. It was weight and mass and solid matter between the soldier and the universe. The Pulse Annihilator might as well have been a strong wind. The humans kept walking. Now the fear was spreading among the Vern troops. They had never seen this before. No enemy had ever kept coming after the Pulse Annihilator fired. No enemy had ever walked through their plasma fire like it was nothing. These humans were not stopping. They were not even slowing down. Threx screamed at his soldiers to keep firing. They obeyed, but Su-Min could see the panic in their movements. Shots were going wild. Formations were breaking apart. Some Vern were already backing away toward the colony entrance. The humans closed the distance step by step. Private Lee Dong-Hyan was walking at the right end of the line. He was 28 years old, from a farming family in a small Korean town. He had joined the military because he wanted to see the stars. Now he was walking toward an enemy fortress, taking hits that would have killed any unshielded soldier, and he could not stop smiling inside his helmet. This was what the armor was for. This was why humans had spent 6 years designing something that every other species laughed at. Because humans understood something that the galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes you cannot run. Sometimes you cannot hide. Sometimes you have to plant your feet and take the hit. And then you have to keep going. The Vern fired the Pulse Annihilator again. And again. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Each pulse washed over the human platoon like a warm breeze. Each time, the armored soldiers kept walking. Threx made a decision. If ranged weapons could not stop these humans, then his soldiers would meet them in close combat. Vern were strong and fast. Their claws could tear through metal. Their jaws could crush bone. Surely these slow, heavy humans could not fight at close range. He ordered his troops to charge. 50 Vern warriors rushed forward, closing the distance in seconds. They reached the human line and threw themselves at the armored soldiers with fury, and desperation. Corporal Choi Yena met the first attacker with her armored fist. The impact was like a hammer hitting stone. The Vern warrior flew backward, stunned by the force of the blow. Yena's armor weighed 200 kilograms. Every punch she threw carried that weight behind it. The close-quarters fight was brutal and short. Vern claws scraped against ceramic plates, leaving scratches but drawing no blood. Vern warriors tried to tackle human soldiers and found themselves unable to move the armored forms. It was like trying to wrestle a statue. Sergeant Yoon grabbed a Vern by the arm and threw him aside with the kind of enhanced strength that only powered armor could provide. Another Vern leaped onto his back, trying to find gaps in his armor. Yoon simply fell backward, letting his armor's weight crush the attacker beneath him. Lieutenant Su Min moved through the chaos with deadly efficiency. She did not waste motion. Every step, every strike, every shot was calculated. Her rifle barked in short bursts, dropping Vern fighters with precise hits to vulnerable spots. In 3 minutes, it was over. The surviving Vern fled toward the colony entrance. They left their fallen comrades behind. They left their weapons behind. They ran because staying meant dying, and dying against an enemy that could not be stopped was not bravery. It was stupidity. Su Min let them go. Her mission was not to chase fleeing enemies. Her mission was to reach the hostages. She looked at her soldiers. All 30 were still standing. Some had dented armor. Some had cracked ceramic plates. A few moved stiffly, bruised beneath their protective layers. But everyone was alive. Everyone was still in the fight. "Report casualties," she ordered. "0 combat losses," Sergeant Yoon replied. "Minor damage across the platoon. All soldiers combat effective." Su Min nodded. She looked toward the colony entrance, now visible in the distance. The outer door had been designed to keep the harsh environment out. It had not been designed to keep a platoon of armored humans from coming in. "Private Kang," she said, "you are our breaching specialist. Get us inside." Minji stepped forward, the breaching charges on her armor already armed and ready. She was still scared. She would probably be scared for the rest of the mission. But her hands were steady as she prepared to blow the door. Behind her, the rest of the platoon formed up. They had just done something impossible. They had walked through the deadliest weapon in the galaxy and kept fighting. Now it was time to do something even harder. It was time to go inside and bring those hostages home. The explosion tore through the colony's outer door like thunder. Metal fragments flew inward, spinning through the dusty air. Before the debris had even settled, Private Kang Minji was already moving forward, her rifle raised and ready. The humans poured through the breach in pairs, each soldier covering the other. The corridor beyond was dimly lit, emergency lights casting red shadows on the metal walls. The colony had been designed for efficiency, not beauty. Narrow hallways connected larger chambers in a web-like pattern that spread beneath the planet's surface. Su Min took point, her armor sensors mapping the environment and feeding data to her heads-up display. The hostage dome was approximately 800 meters ahead, at the heart of the colony complex. Between her platoon and those civilians were hundreds of meters of corridors, side rooms, and defensive positions filled with Vern fighters who were now fully aware that their outer perimeter had been destroyed. She split her forces. 15 soldiers would follow her toward the Pulse Annihilator control center. If they could disable the weapon, the coalition forces outside could rejoin the fight. The other 15, led by Sergeant Yoon Jae-won, would push toward the hostage dome and secure the civilians. "Stay in contact," Su Min ordered. "If either team encounters resistance they cannot handle, the other team provides support. Our priority is the hostages, but we cannot leave the Pulse Annihilator active. Understood?" 15 helmet lights blinked in acknowledgement. No words were needed. The team separated at the first junction. Sergeant Yoon led his soldiers down the main corridor, while Su-min took her team through a narrower service tunnel that her armor's sensors showed leading toward the colony's power center. The first ambush came 30 seconds later. Vern fighters had barricaded themselves behind overturned equipment at the end of the service tunnel. They opened fire the moment the humans appeared, filling the narrow space with plasma bolts and kinetic rounds. The noise was deafening, even through armored helmets. Su-min raised her left arm, and the shield mounted there deployed with a metallic clang. It was not an energy shield. It was a physical barrier, a curved plate of layered ceramic and metal that could stop anything short of artillery. The plasma bolts struck it and scattered, filling the air with sparks and smoke. She advanced step by step, her soldiers falling in behind her and using her shield as cover. The Vern kept firing, but their shots could not penetrate. They could not slow her down. They could only watch as death walked toward them at 4 kilometers per hour. When she reached the barricade, Su-min did not hesitate. She pushed through it, sending crates and equipment flying with the sheer mass of her armor. The Vern behind. The barrier scrambled to escape, but the corridor was too narrow. There was nowhere to run. The fight lasted 11 seconds. Meanwhile, Sergeant Yoon's team had reached the main corridor leading to the hostage dome. The path was wider here, designed to allow cargo vehicles to pass. That meant the Vern had more room to maneuver and more soldiers to throw at the humans. About 80 Vern fighters held defensive positions along the corridor. They had set up heavy weapons on tripods, barriers made of welded metal, and even a few automated gun turrets that tracked movement and fired without human control. It was a killing field designed to stop an army. Yoon looked at his 14 soldiers. Then he looked at the defenses ahead. 2 by 2, he said. First pair draws fire. Second pair advances. Rotate until we reach the dome. It was a simple plan. Simple plans were the best kind in situations like this. Complex plans fell apart the moment they met reality. Simple plans just needed soldiers brave enough to execute them. Private Beak, Jin-ho, and Corporal Kim So-ra stepped forward as the first pair. They walked into the corridor with their rifles raised, making themselves visible to every Vern defender. The enemy opened fire immediately, concentrating everything they had on the 2 exposed humans. Jin-ho and So-ra took the hits. Their armor sparked and groaned. Warning lights flickered across their displays, but they did not fall. They stood their ground, soaking up punishment while the next pair advanced past them. That pair took up a new position 10 meters ahead, then drew fire themselves while another pair moved forward. Leapfrog, advance, hold, repeat. The oldest military tactics in human history, adapted for a battle that no general on Earth could have imagined. The Vern heavy weapons roared continuously. The automated turrets fired until their barrels glowed red hot. Nothing worked. The humans kept coming, slow and unstoppable, like a tide that could not be turned back. Back in the service tunnels, Su-min's team had reached the power center. A large chamber filled with humming generators and glowing conduits spread out before them. At the far end, she could see the Pulse Annihilator itself. A massive machine that filled half the room, its coils wrapped around a central sphere that pulsed with barely contained energy. 6 Vern technicians worked frantically at control stations, trying to boost the weapon's power. Armed guards surrounded them, weapons raised and ready. This was the heart of the Vern operation. If the humans could destroy it, everything would change. But Su-min's engineer training told her something else. The Pulse Annihilator was connected to the colony's main power grid. If she simply destroyed it, the resulting explosion could cause a chain reaction that would damage the life support systems. Thousands of hostages depended on that life support. She could not risk their lives, even to win the battle. She needed to disable the weapon, not destroy it. Change of plan, she told her team. We take the control room intact. Suppress the guards. Do not damage the equipment. It was a harder mission than simply blowing everything up. But hard missions were why humans had trained so long. They had not come this far to kill the people they were trying to save. The assault on the control room was precise and violent. Armored soldiers burst through the entrance from 3 different points, overwhelming the guards with sheer physical presence. Su Min personally disabled 2 defenders, slamming them into the walls with impacts that left them unconscious but alive. The technicians surrendered immediately. They were not soldiers. They had never expected to fight armored humans at close range. They raised their hands and begged for mercy in their clicking language. Su Min ignored them and approached the Pulse Annihilator. Up close, it was even more impressive than she had expected. The technology was beyond anything humans had developed. The power it contained could level a small city if released all at once. She studied the control panels, calling on every bit of engineering knowledge she possessed. The system was complex, but complexity was not the same as invincibility. Every machine had critical components. Every weapon had parts that could not function without the others. She found them. 3 power regulators that kept the energy flow stable. Remove them, and the weapon would shut down safely. Unable to fire, but also unable to explode. Working carefully, she disconnected each regulator one by one. The Pulse Annihilator's hum grew quieter. The glowing coils dimmed. The sphere at the center flickered and went dark. The weapon that had terrified the galaxy for decades was now just a very large paperweight. Su-Min opened a communication channel. Commander Kirix, this is Lieutenant Park. The Pulse Annihilator has been neutralized. Coalition forces can approach without risk to their shields. For a long moment, there was only static. Then, Kirix's voice came through, weak with exhaustion and something else. Something that might have been hope. Acknowledged, Lieutenant. Coalition forces are moving to support. Hold your position. Su Min looked at her soldiers. They were battered and tired, but their eyes were bright behind their visors. We will do more than hold our position, she said. We are going to help Sergeant Yoon secure those hostages. Move out. They had done the impossible once. Now it was time to do it again. Sergeant Yoon's team was in trouble. The corridor to the hostage dome had become a grinding nightmare. The Vern had thrown everything they had at the advancing humans. Heavy weapons, explosive charges, even desperate hand-to-hand attacks by warriors who knew they were going to lose but refused to give up without a fight. The armor held. It always held. But holding and winning were not the same thing. Private Baek Jin-ho had taken so many hits that his chest plate was cracked in 3 places. The shock-absorbing gel beneath had compressed to its limits, and every impact now sent painful jolts through his ribs. He could barely breathe without sharp pain stabbing his sides. But he kept moving forward because stopping meant letting his squad mates down. Corporal Kim So-ra's right arm servo had been damaged by a concentrated plasma burst. Her armored limb now moved slowly and stiffly, requiring extra effort for every motion. She had switched her rifle to her left hand and kept fighting, her accuracy only slightly reduced. The team had advanced 400 meters. They had 200 more to go, and the Vern were getting desperate. Commander Threx had pulled every fighter he could spare to block the main corridor. Nearly 150 Vern now stood between the humans and the hostages. They had constructed multiple defensive lines, each one designed to slow the armored soldiers just a little more. Death by 1,000 cuts. Even if the armor could not be penetrated, the soldiers inside would eventually tire. Eventually, they would make mistakes. Yoon understood the Vern strategy. It was the same thing he would do in their position. Wear down the enemy. Make every meter cost them something. Hope that fatigue or damage would create an opening. He had to change the equation. "All units, form up on me," he ordered. "We are going to push through in one concentrated thrust. Stay tight. Cover each other. Do not stop for anything." His soldiers gathered around him, forming a wedge shape with Yoon at the point. It was a formation as old as warfare itself. The Romans had used it. The Greeks before them. Humans had been punching through enemy lines for thousands of years, thought they moved forward as one. The Vern opened fire with everything they had. The noise was like standing inside a thunderstorm. Plasma bolts struck armor plates and scattered in showers of sparks. Kinetic rounds ricocheted off helmet visors and shoulder guards. The wedge pushed forward, slow but relentless. Yoon felt impacts that would have killed him a dozen times over if not for the K7's protection. His display showed damage warnings across every system. But the armor held. The gel absorbed. The ceramics deflected. And his legs kept moving, one step at a time. They hit the first defensive line and broke through it like a fist through paper. Vern fighters scattered to avoid being trampled by armored giants. The second line fell moments later. Then the third. And then they were at the hostage dome. The entrance was a massive door designed to seal the habitat against the harsh environment outside. It was not locked. The Vern had never expected anyone to reach this point. Yoon pushed it open and stepped inside. The sight that greeted him would stay in his memory forever. Nearly 2,800 beings huddled in the center of the dome. Veluxi, Dasari, Corvani, humans, and a dozen other species. Families clung to each other. Children hid behind their parents. The elderly and the sick lay on makeshift beds, too weak to stand. They looked at the armored figures in the doorway with expressions of pure terror. For a moment, Yoon did not understand. Then he realized. These people had spent days in captivity, watching Vern soldiers patrol the dome with weapons ready. They had heard the battle outside. They had heard explosions and screaming. And now, massive armored figures had burst through their door. They did not know if they were being rescued or executed. Yoon reached up and retracted his helmet visor. His face appeared, human and tired and smiling despite everything. "My name is Sergeant Yoon Jae-won of the Earth Defense Forces," he said, his translator broadcasting his words in a dozen languages simultaneously. "We are here to take you home." For a moment, there was silence. Then a child began to cry. Not from fear this time. From relief. The sound spread through the dome like a wave. And suddenly, everyone was crying, laughing, calling out thanks in languages that Yoon could not understand but felt in his heart. A young Veluxi girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old by human standards, approached him cautiously. Her compound eyes reflected the lights of the dome, making them look like scattered stars. "Are you the ones who walked through the fire?" she asked in halting common speech. Yoon knelt down, his armor groaning with the motion. "Yes, we are the ones who walked through the fire. Why did you come for us?" The Vern said no one would come. They said the pulse weapon would stop everyone. Yoon smiled. It did stop everyone. Everyone except us. Why not you? He thought about how to explain it. The girl was young. She did not need lectures about material science or the difference between energy shields and physical protection. She needed something simpler. "We come from a hard world," he said finally. "A world that tried to kill us with heat and cold, with storms and floods, with animals that wanted to eat us. We learned to survive by putting things between ourselves and danger. Walls, shields, armor. We never stopped doing that. Even when we reached the stars, we never forgot how to stand in front of something dangerous and refuse to move." The girl blinked her compound eyes slowly. "So you are like walking walls?" "Yes," Yoon said. "Exactly like walking walls." At that moment, Lieutenant Sumin's voice crackled through his helmet speakers. Sergeant Yoon. Report status. Yoon stood up and put his hand on the Veluxy girl's head, a gesture of comfort that transcended species. Hostage dome secured, Lieutenant. Approximately 2,800 civilians recovered. All alive. Outstanding. Coalition reinforcements are 10 minutes out. The pulse annihilator is neutralized. Hold the dome until they arrive. Understood, Lieutenant. We will not move. The girl tugged at Yoon's armored leg. You are staying? Yes, until help comes. What if the bad people come back? Yoon looked at his soldiers, scattered around the dome with their weapons ready and their battered armor still holding together despite everything. Then he looked back at the child. Then they will have to get through us first. And that is not going to happen. The girl smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain and fragile. But it was real. And for Sergeant Yoon Jae-won, standing in a room full of people who had been waiting to die and were now waiting to live, that smile was worth every bruise, every crack in his armor, every terrifying moment of the advance. This was why humans wore the heavy armor. Not because it made them faster, not because it made them invincible, but because it let them stand between the helpless and the harm. It let them be the wall, and walls did not move. Commander Threx received the report about the pulse annihilator with cold fury. His greatest weapon was gone. The coalition reinforcements would arrive soon with working shields and fresh troops. His window of victory had closed, but he could still hurt them. He could still make them pay for humiliating the Vern Collective. He gathered every remaining fighter under his command. 300 warriors, armed and desperate. The humans had split their forces to take the control room and the hostage dome. That meant each position was defended by only 15 soldiers. 300 against 15. Even with their impossible armor, the humans could not hold forever. Threx ordered the assault. Sergeant Yoon heard them coming before he saw them. The thunder of hundreds of feet pounding against metal floors. The clicking speech of Vern commanders directing their troops. The whine of weapons powering up for what would be a final, overwhelming attack. He had 9 minutes until coalition reinforcements arrived. 9 minutes against 300 enemies. Everyone to defensive positions, he ordered. We hold the entrances. No one gets past us. His soldiers moved into place. 3 at each of the dome's 4 entrances. 3 in reserve to support wherever the pressure became too great. It was not enough. It could never be enough. But it would have to do. The first wave hit like a storm. Vern fighters poured through every entrance simultaneously, firing as they came. The narrow doorways became killing zones as human soldiers stood in the gaps, their armored bodies blocking the way. The K-7's weight became an advantage here. A 200-kilogram soldier in a doorframe was nearly impossible to move by force. Private Cam Minji held the eastern entrance with 2 other soldiers. She had never been in a real battle before today. Now she was fighting for her life against warriors who had spent decades perfecting the art of killing. Plasma bolts struck her armor so frequently that she could feel the heat building up inside. Her suit's cooling systems worked overtime to keep her from roasting. But she held her ground at the western entrance. Corporal Choi Yena's damaged arm gave out completely. The servo died with a grinding sound, leaving the limb hanging uselessly at her side. She switched to a sidearm and kept firing with her left hand, using her body to block the doorway while her squad mates covered the flanks. The Vern brought up heavy weapons. A mounted cannon that should have been used against vehicles, not infantry. They positioned it at the end of the corridor and fired directly at the soldiers blocking the main entrance. Private Lee Donghyun took the shot full in the chest. The impact was like being hit by a speeding vehicle. His armor cracked. The ceramic outer layer shattered. The metal beneath dented inward, pressing against the gel layer with crushing force. Warning lights filled his display. System failures cascaded through his suit. He went down, but even as he fell, he kept his rifle up. Even lying on the floor with cracked ribs and a suit that was barely holding together, he kept firing at the enemies trying to push through the entrance. Corporal Choi Yena grabbed his armor with her good hand and dragged him behind cover, putting herself between him and the incoming fire. Lieutenant Sumin arrived with her team just as the battle reached its worst moment. She had heard the fighting through her communicator and pushed her soldiers to move faster than the heavy armor was designed to allow. Now she threw herself into the chaos, her presence turning the tide at the critical moment. Her team reinforced the weakest positions. Fresh soldiers replaced those who had taken too much damage. The humans formed an unbroken ring around the hostages, their armor creating a wall of metal and ceramic that the Vern could not penetrate. Commander Threx watched his assault crumble and ordered his troops to concentrate everything on the main entrance. If they could break through at one point, they could flood the dome with soldiers. Even the humans could not stop an army if it got past their line. The concentrated assault was brutal. Sumin stood at the center of the main entrance, taking hit after hit. Her shield had been destroyed earlier in the fighting. Her rifle had overheated and become useless. She fought with her fists, her armored hands striking with bone-crushing force at any Vern that came within reach. A Vern warrior got behind her and jumped onto her back, trying to find a gap in her armor where a knife could penetrate. She fell backward deliberately, crushing the attacker beneath 200 kilograms of human and metal. She rose immediately and continued fighting. 4 minutes left. The Vern assault began to waver. They had lost too many fighters. The humans had not fallen. Every entrance was still blocked by battered but standing soldiers who simply refused to move. Threx screamed orders at his troops, but the fear had spread too far. Warriors who had been confident of victory were now looking for escape routes. They had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that could not be stopped. An enemy that stood in fire and did not burn. 3 minutes left. Sue Dashman felt her armor's power reserves dropping into the danger zone. The constant impacts had drained energy faster than the backup systems could replace it. In a few more minutes, she would be fighting in dead armor, carrying its full weight without mechanical assistance. She did not care. She would carry it if she had to. She would crawl if she had to. These people behind her were depending on her, and she would not let them down. 2 minutes left. A Vern explosive charge detonated near the southern entrance, throwing 2 human soldiers across the dome. They landed hard, their armor screaming with damage alerts. One of them, Private Beak Jinho, did not get up. His armor had finally reached its limit, cracked beyond functionality. He was alive, but could not move. 1 minute left. The Vern made one final push. Every warrior who could still fight threw themselves at the human line. It was desperation, fury, and fear combined into one overwhelming wave. The humans did not break. They bent. They stumbled. They bled inside their damaged suits. But they did not break. And then, with 40 seconds to spare, the coalition reinforcements arrived. Veluxi shock troops flooded the corridors, their blue shields now working perfectly with the pulse annihilator neutralized. The Sari warriors glided through the chaos, their energy fields pushing Vern fighters aside like leaves in a wind. Corvani. Heavy weapons teams set up covering positions and poured fire into the retreating enemy. Commander Threx tried to rally his troops for a final stand, but there was nothing left to rally. His warriors were broken, scattered, and running for any exit they could find. The battle for Karath 4 was overdone in the hostage dome. The coalition soldiers found a scene they would never forget. 30 human soldiers stood in a loose ring around nearly 2,800 civilians. Their armor was burned, dented, cracked, and barely functional. Several soldiers could not stand without support from their squad mates. One was lying on the ground, being treated by a medic who had rushed in with the reinforcements. But they had held 7 minutes against 300 enemies. 7 minutes of taking every hit the Vern could deliver. 7 minutes of refusing to fall. Lieutenant Su-min stood at the center of the dome, her armor so damaged that it no longer looked like military equipment. It looked like something that had been through a trash compactor and somehow survived. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, where a sharp impact had briefly overwhelmed her helmet's internal padding. Commander Kirix approached her. His compound eyes reflected the chaos around them, the medics rushing to treat wounded, the civilians crying with relief, the battered human soldiers finally allowing themselves to sit down. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. He had mocked these soldiers. He had assigned them to a useless position because he thought their armor was a joke. And they had saved everyone. Su-min looked at him with tired eyes. She did not say anything either. There was nothing to say. The results spoke louder than any words could. Finally, Kirix bowed his head. Among the Veluxi, it was the highest gesture of respect one warrior could offer another. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I was wrong about everything." Su-min nodded once. Then she turned to check on her soldiers, leaving the commander standing alone with his humility. The Coalition medical station on Harmony Prime was quiet in the early morning hours. Most patients were sleeping, recovering from the wounds they had suffered during the battle for Kurith 4. The soft hum of medical equipment filled the air like a gentle song. Lieutenant Park Su-min sat on the edge of a hospital bed, wearing a simple medical gown instead of her battered armor. Her ribs were wrapped in regenerative bandages. Her arms showed purple bruises where the armor's internal padding had failed to completely absorb impacts. The cut on her forehead had been treated and sealed, leaving only a thin pink line that would fade in a few days. She was alive. All 30 of her soldiers were alive. That was what mattered. A knock on the doorframe made her look up. "Commander." Kirix stood in the entrance, his tall form filling the space. He looked different now. The arrogance that had defined him at the military exhibition was gone. In its place was something that might have been humility. "May I enter?" he asked. Su-min nodded. "Of course, Commander." Kirix walked to a chair near her bed and sat down carefully. His compound eyes studied her for a long moment before he spoke. "I owe you an apology," he said, "and not just an apology. I owe you an explanation for my behavior." Su-min waited. She had learned long ago that sometimes the best response was silence. "When I first saw your armor at the exhibition," Kirix continued, "I saw only its limitations. It was heavy. It was slow. It used no energy technology. To me, it looked like something from a primitive age. I could not understand why any species would choose such a path when better options existed." He paused, his hands clasping together in what Su-min had learned was a Veluxi gesture of confession. "I did not consider that the better options might not always be available. I did not think about what happens when shields fail, when technology breaks down, when all the advanced systems in the galaxy simply stop working. The Vern taught you that lesson," Su-min said quietly. "No," Kirix replied. "You taught me that lesson. The Vern only created the conditions. You showed me what it means to keep fighting when everything has gone wrong." He leaned forward, his voice intense. "How did you know? How did you know that your armor would survive the Pulse Annihilator?" Su-min thought about the question carefully before answering. "We did not know for certain," she admitted. "But we hoped. Humans are good at hoping. We come from a world that should have killed us 1,000 times. Weather that freezes or burns. Gravity that crushes. Predators that hunt us. We survived all of it because we learned to put barriers between ourselves and danger. First it was animal skins and cave walls. Then wooden shields and stone fortresses. Then metal armor and reinforced bunkers. We never stopped. We never looked at a problem and said that it could not be solved with simple, solid protection. She smiled slightly. The galaxy moved past such things. Energy shields are cleaner, lighter, more elegant. But elegance is not the same as reliability. When your power fails, when your containment fields collapse, when your advanced technology betrays you, what do you have left? Nothing, Kirik said quietly. Exactly. Humans knew that we might face situations where nothing worked. So we built armor that does not need to work. It just needs to exist. Mass does not fail. Ceramic does not collapse. Metal does not require a power source to be solid. Kirik was silent for a long time. Finally, he stood up. I have submitted a formal request to the Coalition Military Council, he said. I have asked them to reconsider the doctrine of energy shield dependence. I have recommended that all Coalition species study human armor technology and consider developing physical protection systems of their own. Su Min raised her eyebrows. That must have been difficult for you. It was the least I could do. You saved my soldiers. You saved the hostages. You showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. He paused. You have my gratitude, Lieutenant, and my respect. He turned and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he stopped and looked back. At the next military exhibition, I will make sure the human display has the largest platform in the hall. You have earned it. After he left, Su Min lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling. The pain in her ribs was a dull ache now, barely noticeable compared to the exhaustion that filled every part of her body. But despite the pain, despite the tiredness, she felt something warm in her chest, not pride in herself, though she had earned that too. Pride in her species. Pride in the fact that humanity had faced the galaxy's deadliest weapon and simply refused to be stopped. Pride in the soldiers who had walked through fire because there were people who needed saving. A week later, the official ceremony was held on Harmony Prime. The same exhibition hall that had hosted the military technology show was now filled with dignitaries from across the Coalition. The Luxi, the Sari, Corvani, and dozens of other species had gathered to honor the heroes of K-4.20-6 human. Soldiers stood on the stage, wearing their dress uniforms. Four more watched from the front row of seats, still recovering from their injuries, but well enough to attend. Private Li Donghayan was in a hover chair, his cracked ribs still healing, but he was smiling as widely as anyone. The Coalition Medal of Valor was presented to each soldier individually. It was the highest honor the Coalition could bestow, given only to those who had demonstrated extraordinary courage in the face of overwhelming odds. When the ceremony was finished, the crowd broke into applause that seemed to shake the walls of the Great Hall. Humans, aliens, beings of energy, and beings of flesh all joined together in celebrating the soldiers who had proven that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways. In the crowd, old veteran Drell watched with quiet satisfaction. He had known this day would come. He had seen it in the eyes of human soldiers years ago, during a small battle that the galaxy had already forgotten. He had seen their stubborn refusal to give up, their willingness to carry weight that would break other species, their fundamental belief that standing your ground was worth any price. After the ceremony, he approached Lieutenant Su Min. She recognized him immediately from the exhibition weeks ago. You knew, she said. Before anyone else, you knew what our armor could do. Drell nodded slowly. I knew what humans could do. The armor is just an extension of what you already are. And what is that? The old Kovani thought for a moment, searching for the right words. There is a concept in my language, he said. It does not translate well, but it means something like those who carry weight that would crush others. Not just physical weight, the weight of responsibility, of duty, of caring for those who cannot protect themselves. He looked at her with his old, scarred eyes. Humans carry that weight naturally. You always have. Your armor is just how you share that weight with the rest of your body. You spread the burden so that no single part has to bear it alone. And because you share the burden, you can carry more than anyone else thinks possible. Su-min felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than I can express." Drell bowed his head in the same gesture of respect that Kirix had used. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. In the weeks that followed, something changed in the galaxy. Human armor technology became the subject of intense study. Species that had mocked physical protection began requesting blueprints and technical specifications. Military academies that had taught the superiority of energy shields started adding courses on composite armor and shock absorption. The Verne Collective withdrew from known space, their reputation shattered. They had possessed the most feared weapon in the galaxy, and a handful of humans had walked through it like it was nothing. No one feared them anymore. And somewhere in the depths of space, a new generation of soldiers began training in heavy armor. The Luxi, the Sari, Kavani, and others learned to carry weight that their ancestors would have found impossible. They learned the lesson that humans had taught them. Sometimes the best way forward is to look back. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the strongest. And sometimes, when everything else fails, the only thing that matters is being too stubborn to fall down. Lieutenant Park Soo-min returned to active duty 3 weeks after the ceremony. She was assigned to lead a new training program, teaching alien soldiers how to fight in human-style armor. It was challenging work, frustrating at times. Many species struggled with the weight. Many could not understand why anyone would choose to move slowly when speed was an option. But some understood, and those who understood became the best soldiers in the galaxy. On quiet nights, when the training was done and their students had gone to rest, Su-min would look out at the stars and think about all the battles still to come. There would always be enemies. There would always be threats. There would always be people who needed protecting. And there would always be soldiers willing to carry the weight. That was enough. That would always be enough.